So the next presentation we have, and the final presentation for the day, is the Future of Respectful Workplace Week. And the speakers today are actually going to be myself and Michelle Thompson. So you've all been listening to me all day anyway, but for those who don't know me, or for those who weren't here this morning when I gave a brief introduction of myself, my name's Nicole Smith. I'm the chair of the Workplace Violence and Abuse Research Team, which is the group that organizes Respectful Workplace Week every year. And I am an independent consultant who specializes in workplace conflict management. So I've been working in the field of workplace specific conflict management for over 10 years. And I am incredibly passionate about harassment prevention and about workplace conflict management. And so that's what led me to get involved in this work. And then, of course, what led me to end up being the chair. And I am presenting today with Michelle Thompson, who uses she, her pronouns. I will say, especially in light of Spencer's presentation, I also go by she, her pronouns. Michelle is the Executive Director of Public Legal Education and Information Service of New Brunswick. She joined PLEIS in 2022 following a decade of work in public legal education and access to justice nonprofits in Ontario. She holds a JD from Osgoode Hall Law School. Her legal career is informed by her experiences and interest in feminist organizing, labor justice, and digital culture. So thank you for joining me for this session this afternoon, Michelle.
Hi, Nicole. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you too. So I'm going to jump in with sort of my part of this presentation. So this session is a chance for me and Michelle to talk about the plan to move Respectful Workplace Week, the event, from the Miriam McQueen Ferguson Center to its new home with Public Legal Education and Information Services, New Brunswick. So I've been a member of MMFC's Workplace Violence and Abuse Research Team since 2017. I've been chair since 2020. We're the group that organizes Respectful Workplace Week and have been doing that for the last 11 years. And it's incredible to me to say that this is our 11th annual event. That's just blows my mind. It's been so wonderful to be a part of and to watch it grow. The research team hosted their first speakers event in 2012 as a way for the original members to share their research findings for the public. For the first few years, it hosted 1 or 2 speakers a year, and it had an audience of 15 or 20 people. In 2022, or sorry, 2018, so before the pandemic, of course, the then co-chairs, Dr. Sue O'Donnell and Anthea Plummer, took the leap of growing the event to an in-person full-day conference. This move happened, I can remember it happened just after I had joined the research team. And I can remember Sue and Anthea worrying that we weren't going to be able to have enough attendees for a full day conference. They booked a half of the boardroom at the Delta, room for 40 people. And I can remember them wondering, are we going to be able to get 40 people to come to our event for the entire day? And exciting and unexpectedly, within I think 2 or 3 days of putting out the information about the Respectful Workplace Week full day event, we already had 40 people registered and we had a wait list. And so at that time, the team scrambled to book the other half of that ballroom. And that year we ended up hosting 80 people in person for our first ever full day event. And so in 2020, when I had just become chair and the pandemic had just hit, the research team made the decision to move us online, which most everyone did at the time. But for us, it really unlocked this amazing connection to access. Not only did it give us as a research team, as a group organizing, the ability to access speakers from outside of New Brunswick or from other parts of New Brunswick. I mean, we just had, Spencer in here speaking to us from BC. It also really opened up access to individuals to come to the session. So one of the things that we really sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. I apologize for that. End of the day. So in having our event online, even after the pandemic started to slow down or minimize, or we were vaccinated in a way that would have allowed us to bring it back to in person, we decided to continue having it as an online event because that first year we did it online, we averaged, 100 people per event. This year we're averaging 120 people per event. So the ability for us to get participants in from all over the province has really been linked to having it virtual. Since moving to this virtual format, we've also been able to grow the size and the content of the event. This is our second year of having a full 3 days of presentations. This year, we have 28 speakers that are speaking over the 3-day period. That is a considerable leap from the 1 to 2 that were speaking in those original years. And those original presentations, getting people out to hear that academic research was incredible, but to be able to expand it to the content we've had has been so worthwhile. We've expanded the kinds of presentations we're giving now. This event was, as I said, originally about sharing research. And now, in addition to research, we host presentations on regulations, on best practices, on tools and skills. And the people who sit on the research team are so passionate about these topics because they all work in one way or another. Most of them work in one way or another in this field or have experienced and been touched personally by elements of disrespect in their workplaces. So all of that to say, the growth of Respectful Workplace Week and this event is the reason that we are now looking at moving it from the Muir-McQueen-Ferguson Centre to its new home at PLEIS, New Brunswick. For a couple of years in the background of this event, the Workplace Violence and Abuse Research Team and the Muir-McQueen-Ferguson Centre has been having a conversation. How do we continue to manage? What do we want to do about this wonderful but unwieldy now conference that we created? And so the, Muir-McQueen-Ferguson Centre has been an incredible support to us and home for us for the past 11 years. But we realized that the conference is now too large. The event is too large to be managed, to be organized and hosted by a group of volunteers. So PLEIS New Brunswick has been a member of the WVAT for the last couple of years. And so when they stepped up to talk about potentially becoming the new home for the event, it felt very right. PLEIS New Brunswick is a nonprofit. You've heard it a few times in the last couple of days. They're a nonprofit that provides free, easy to understand information about legal matters to New Brunswickers. One of the driving principles of the Workplace Violence and Abuse research team in organizing Respectful Workplace Week has always been to provide free, accessible information to the participants about respectful workplaces. So I think that it's a really good match. So I want to hand the mic over to Michelle to talk about what this plan looks like.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. From our side, this felt like a really natural way to continue engaging with Respectful Workplaces Week for a couple of reasons. First of all, as you mentioned, we have been a contributing organization to the event for the last little bit, but I think even beyond that, I mean, you've spoken a little bit about how one of the WVAT's goals with this event was to do that sort of broader education piece. And of course, that's sort of the core of what we do. Conversely, we've really been shaped by a history of leaders at our organization who were really steeped in a research background, in a background that was centered around gender-based violence. So I think, we have a really natural history with the Muir-McQueen-Ferguson Centre, the same way we do with Respectful Workplaces Week. We're so excited to be stepping up as the sort of convening organization for next year's. And I want to talk a little bit about what that will mean. One of the things that I want to say, first of all, before we get any further, is that this is not a full transfer or a cutting out of the MMFC or of the WVAT. we continue to be partners on this. We work so closely with and depend on the entire WVAT team. Honestly, I think you're going to see a lot of the same faces next year as hosts. I hope Nicole is willing to come back and continue to be sort of one of the anchors of the event in the future, because we're certainly banking on the expertise, the ideas, the enthusiasm, the networks, the contributions of everyone who is affiliated with the research team and also with the center more broadly. What I hope that we can bring is just a little bit of administrative and logistical infrastructure. So we don't want to be driving content necessarily, but what we can offer is an in-house team that is experienced with putting on these kinds of events. We have in-house expertise around hosting online or in-person conferences. We have a good amount of in-house expertise and experience about creating resources for the public. And so I think our goal is to take a lot of that administrative burden off, frankly, the volunteer team that has been doing it all right now, and create something more sustainable where the people who should just be giving advice as knowledge specialists can do that and not also have to worry about setting up Zoom invitations, which if anyone out there has had to set up Zoom invitations for a huge number of events over a short period, you'll know how big of a slice of the puzzle that is. On top of that, you know, we're hoping that there's going to be some advantages to Respectful Workplaces Week in terms of centralizing and clarifying. Like we'll have a home website or microsite or like standard page for it, where it'll be really easy for people to go find out what's going on, get registered, get all the information in one place. You know, we have some communications infrastructure that can hopefully help with promotions and distribution and all that kind of stuff. So we're just really hopeful that we can be a piece of the puzzle in letting Respectful Workplaces Week continue to sort of honestly grow to meet the demand and to meet the changes that are going on in New Brunswick and in the context in which we all work. You know, RWW is such a success story. Every step where there's been sort of a new adaptation in what was required or was necessary, or how we had to make changes in order to keep things going, it seems like more momentum has gathered at every turn. Like instead of people being turned off of sitting through a multi-day, full day event, we've continued to build an audience year over year. And, you know, we want to continue to do that. We have a couple of ideas about how that might happen. None of them are set in stone yet, but I'm happy to share some of the directions we're considering. I think one of the big things that I'm curious in my head, and I think you'll see some questions about this in the evaluation or the participant feedback questionnaire that you get at the end, is it seems to me that at this point, Respectful Workplaces Week, at least potentially, has sort of dual audiences. I think there's sort of the long-term audience of people who maybe work in this area or work intimately enough or closely with it enough that they want like multiple days of programming every September, that this is meeting a good need. They want to learn about the research. They want to hear about all the stuff that's going on. I think Respectful Workplaces Week has started to obtain a sort of secondary audience, which is, you know, members of the public who may not be able to, who are at employers or employees who may not be able to carve out 2 or 3 full days to go in depth in the way that those of us who are attending the full event do, but who nonetheless want to tune in and pick up particular pieces of the puzzle, right? And so, you know, one of the things that we're exploring for next year or the year after that is whether we should think about having sort of a stream of programming that's maybe something like 2 days, maybe it's 3 days, still online, looks very similar to how RWW looks now, has a research component, and is sort of focused on our community talking about developments in this area. And then we have a sort of secondary channel of Respectful Workplaces Week that is, you know, one-off events that are sort of very public or outward facing, that are practical skills training, delivered to be actionable and implementable in your workplace sort of right away, that might be interesting for a broader audience that maybe isn't going to sit down for 2 or 3 days and be at everything, but might see, for example, safer places is front of mind for me. You heard from my colleague Amber this morning talking about this project. A safer places training on workplace harassment and the law, and some relevant tools and skills around addressing harassment at work, and that might be something that some people would sign up for a single session, even if the broader research and everything is sort of outside what they need. That's just an example of, some of the core ideas that we're tossing around. And, I'd like to say at this point that I'm really, really interested in hearing feedback from people who are attending, from people who've worked on respectable workplaces before. We don't view this as, this isn't a change in management that means a change in everything that's happening. Like we love the core of how this event works. And we're really interested in what the community that supported it for so many years has to say about what should come next. Like, where is it needed? And we're pretty open to the direction that goes in the future. And I think excited by some of the possibilities. Yeah, so I think that's my overview of where we're at.
What you said, Michelle, about how this isn't a change, sort of a change in management, but not really a change in the system or the setup, or kind of doesn't have to mean a change in the access to these kinds of,
Right.
of interesting sessions for people. In a lot of ways, I think of this as, MMFC has said they're trying to manage what they can do. They are a research center. They're saying, you guys are disseminating research, and we don't necessarily have the capacity to continue to support you at the size you've become. And as you've said, us as volunteers, we love this event. I know I'm dedicated to this event. These are topics that I am passionate about, that I work in every day, but we can't necessarily manage it off the sides of our desks in the way that you do when you are a volunteer group. And so in a lot of ways, I really see this move to PLEIS as, our boat's gotten too big for the dock we were at, and we're just moving to a new dock. And the fact that PLEIS has had such a big hand in helping us organize this year, as having Amber sit on the research team with us, I think really shows that PLEIS is taking the torch in a way that's really respectful of the history that's existed with this event, because there's so many participants who, when I scroll through the list of attendees, I see names I recognize that have been coming in the, I've been looking at that list of attendees for 4 years whenever we do it on Zoom, and I see names I recognize. We have people that have come to probably every year or most years since it was being held in the Fredericton Public Library in those first couple of sessions. And I think that, it's exciting to think that those people will recognize what happens next year, even as we move to this new phase.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important to us. We're sort of stepping up to get more involved with this event because we're fans of it, right? So I think keeping that core identity is going to be really important. And also, I just think we're at, particularly with the transition to doing most things online, I think we're at such a good opportunity to continue disseminating and using the sort of momentum around the week to push some of the learnings that we're sharing internally out even further to a broader audience. I mean, maybe the answer is that within the next couple of years, we should think about having satellite events what if we're back in public libraries now and then, but they're in Miramichi and Moncton and other corners of the province. All of that stuff is on the table, and we don't have a lot of predetermined conclusions, except for a couple of guiding principles. One of which is that, I think this event will always be free, or as close to it as we can possibly manage. And the only case I can imagine where it might not be is if we're going to a big in-person thing, and then who knows. Our goal standard is this event is always as accessible as it possibly can be. That starts but doesn't end with financial accessibility. I think we're committed to it continuing to be a fully bilingual event, and all elements of it being fully bilingual. We want it to continue to have a meaningful research presence, to continue to showcase interesting work that's going on in the nonprofit sector or from government or from businesses. And we want to ensure that it's continuing to respond to what's going on in the province. So as new issues emerge, we want to make sure that we're addressing those, whether those are social issues, changes in the law, large current events that have happened over the course of a year that provide interesting opportunities for us to discuss or to take learnings from them. I think that's close to the core of what Respectful Workplaces has been, and it's what we want it to be in the future as well.
It's interesting to hear you talk about, the idea of things like satellite events in smaller cities or in smaller towns, in Miramichi and, Campbellton. The reason this is so exciting to me is because when I first was joining and we were still doing in-person events because the pandemic hadn't hit yet and the world of Zoom wasn't what it is today, we talked all the time about wanting to at least try to expand it to St. John. How do we at least, because we were so anchored in some ways to UNB, because we were part of the Miriam McQueen Ferguson Center, every year we would have a conversation about why are we only hosting events in Fredericton when UNBSJ would want to have access as well. And that's the same for any city, right? Not just UNBSJ, but St. John or Moncton. There would be, I think, interested participants in these locations. And just the size of our committee, we were never able to put that together. And if we hadn't have moved online, I think we would have continued. In 2019, we did a second in-person full day conference. We would have continued to do that. But even that is limiting in how many people can participate because, you only have whatever room capacity you have in the city. And then on top of that, who's willing to drive to Fredericton or who's willing to drive to Moncton? Who's willing to take the full day off work? With virtual, we have such a higher ability for people to come from anywhere in the province. But on top of that, people can come and go, which I really like. People can say, and I've even seen some of our presenters will say to me, okay, I'm going to pop in again for a later session because I want to see that session. And oftentimes, I know you'll see some of them on the screen, like some of them are here with their, it's too complicated to have a bunch of links sent to people. So they're just in on their presenter link, quietly in the background, watching other people present. I am always here as a part of the organizing committee, and sometimes as a presenter, but as a participant too. Those pieces that really speak to getting in depth about what kind of resources are out there, getting information about what new research is happening. I mean, this is my field. And I love having access to that stuff. And so every year as we organize, I get excited because I'm going to get to hear these. So I do think as we move to a new phase, which is really what it is, as we move to a new phase of this, the life of Respectful Workplace Week event, I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity to do things we just didn't have the capacity to do before, the human capacity, the infrastructure. And to have a variety of ways of getting out to people.
Yeah, and I mean, again, none of these are a foregone conclusion. I think we want to hear from people about what you would be interested in seeing. It's a great point about the flexibility of people being able to hop on and off of a remote event without having to be visibly coming and leaving for a room. Like, I can say in our office, almost all of our staff, I'm pretty sure all of our team are tuning in for at least some parts of RWW. We would never have been able to all carve out 3 days to fully attend in person, shut down all of PLEIS's other services, right? But this does give us the flexibility where we have different people popping in and out at different times, and what's relevant for them and what works for their schedule. So hopefully the flexibility is also a piece that we keep going forward.
I have a comment here from Sherry who has said, not just the province, but the country. I'm attending from Alberta. The links were shared with me through my work email. So Sherry, I don't know where you work, but I'm excited to know you got information about the event. We have talked as a committee ever since our first year of doing it virtual, we've talked about, should we be advertising more broadly in the country as a whole? We have this event. We don't think that there's a lot of events like this. Why not share it more broadly? And the only reason that we really haven't gone in that direction is twofold. Firstly, I've always been a big proponent in trying to get to as many of the smaller corners of New Brunswick as we can before we worry about the rest of the country. And Sherry, that's not because we aren't excited that you're here, but that's more so because I am often in my work in smaller parts of the province, seeing how much these topics, these situations are happening, disrespect, harassment, these things are happening in people's workplaces, racism. But also as a volunteer committee, and this is sharing a bit of like the background information, holding ourselves sort of visible for not always being a perfect organizing committee as we like to think we are. We're a small group and we have never had a consistent advertising and promotion plan.
Right.
Even when we were doing it in person, as incredible as our past chairs have been, as incredible as our organizer, we've had Bronwyn Cunningham has been the primary organizer of this event for the last 2 years, who is our pedal representative. She's incredible. When we get to advertising, we have sort of a network of people we advertise through, and that's been great, but we've just never had the capacity, had a consistent plan. And so the idea of moving to an organization that's going to be more on top of that than we have been, to me, is just a cherry on top.
Yeah, I mean, the promotion stuff is tough and it does just take legwork. Like some of this is just we're just an organization that can provide some of somebody's time to be the chair. I mean, the other thing I think, Nicole, is I was shocked to learn that this event has been put on by an all volunteer committee for as many years as it has. Like, I mean, anyone in the comments can correct me if you're wrong, but I think like this little committee has punched above its weight for so many years. I'm just really excited to see what we'll be able to get done with just a little bit of actual infrastructure support, additional infrastructure support in the event setup and the communications and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because shout out to the Mira McQueen Ferguson Center and to Women's Equality Branch and to Pedal and to any other groups I'm missing in that, to PLEIS this year. These groups that our members are part of. So the way that the Workplace Violence and Abuse Research Team works is there are some of us who are community members. We're considered community members. I'm a community member. I don't work for government or a nonprofit. I work for myself. So there are some of us who sit on the committee as individuals. And then there are individual people who sit on the committee as representatives of their organization. So Lindsay Manuel, who you saw speak earlier from Women's Equality Branch, sits as the representative for Women's Equality Branch. Bronwyn Cunningham, who I mentioned earlier, sits there as the representative of Pedal. Amber has been your representative for PLEIS for the last 2 years. These organizations have been giving us infrastructural support, helping us with translation, helping us apply for funding, helping us get access to government grant programs that allow us to make sure we have in simultaneous interpretation. But to be able to take away that patchwork element of it, I think will put an incredible foundation under that ability.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
So
we've got at least 2 people from Alberta. Catherine has also messaged in. I'm so delighted that we have other folks here as well. It's great.
If anybody has any questions for Michelle and I. So Michelle, and I'm going to apologize if I'm asking something you've already answered, because my speakers were cutting in and out. I got the sense that everyone else could hear you, but I couldn't fully hear you. I just want to touch on briefly, what is the sort of plan, or as so far as it's sort of sketched out, for those folks who've been organizing now? So how will we move into supporting PLEIS in this work?
So a lot of this is still to be worked out. I think my vision right now is that PLEIS will have a sort of a core staff member who has it within their primary portfolio to do the support and logistics and basically be the project manager for Respectful Workplaces Week. Beyond that point, I think currently the way a lot of RWW has worked is sort of balancing monthly meetings of the WVAT with a little bit of in between emailing and organizing. I think instead we're probably going to try to transition to a system where we have sort of a bunch of consultative conversations with members of the WVAT, and that might be asynchronous. That might not just be a meeting that everybody has to attend at one time, where we sort of surface a bunch of ideas. I think we'll still and always look to the WVAT for leadership on topics and content, probably speaker ideas, probably a little bit of help with reaching out to speakers, since you guys might have networks that we don't have internally. And I think we're just looking at ultimately moving the team to more of the sort of advisory consulting program design role that is really the best use of your expertise and time, right? Because we can do the lift of the project management, but you guys really are the experts in what's going on within the research, within the academic conversation about these issues. You have a good bird's eye view of what's going on across the province, and have been incredible at coming up with topics for panels, with pairing disparate interests together and figuring out how to do that matching in really interesting ways. So I think we'll sort of continue going back and forth on the design, and then you just won't have to worry about making PDFs of agendas and stuff like that. Imagine
I can't say I'll miss that part.
Imagine if you could just make suggestions for speakers, and then someone else, us, will come back with little promotional packages for all the speakers to share through their organization's social media channels to help spread, so
Absolutely.
It's some of that kind of stuff that I hope we can get to in the next year.
I mean, that just is to me, that's so exciting, in part because you're right. We want to let this grow in the organic way that it's doing. There's obviously an interest in this content. There's obviously a need for this content, but we're, I think of us, the WVAT has been like that duck who looks really calm on the surface and then their feet are going wild underneath, right? And so to be able to provide advisory capacity, to make suggestions, even as we've been going over the presentations today, I jotted down things that speakers were saying about new material, new tools they're developing that we could be talking about next year, right? So those of us who've been doing it for a while now, it's just ingrained in us to always think, oh, that would be great for Respectful Workplace Week. So I think I think the WVAT, the Workplace Violence and Abuse Research Team, we've sat down and talked about this. I mean, we as a team had to decide we were okay with transitioning in this way. And there is a real excitement there about being able to still bring those ideas. And we come from such different areas of this field. And so we all bring our sort of networks to the table, being able to continue to do that, to support Respectful Workplace Week, but to not have to worry about who's going to manage making sure we hire the simultaneous interpreters in time, who's going to make sure we have all of our host notes written in time. And that's an exciting thing to be able to hand off to folks who are going to be on top of it, in a way that you guys are so on top of all the work that you do.
Thank you. We also sometimes feel like the duck with the scurrying feet underneath, but I think at least now we're two ducks that can work together on
100%. So as we kind of wrap this up, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to let us know. But really, the reason we wanted to have this session today at the end of the day is that I'm someone who's incredibly dedicated to this conference. I work in this field every day. I have for a long time, and myself and the other members of WVAT, we've put a lot of volunteer hours into making this conference happen. And to see it moving into such an exciting space, when we were having these conversations in the background about what were we going to do with this giant baby, where were we going to move it? It was growing up and it needed to move out of its home. Where are we going to go with it? I felt a lot of pressure to make that conversation work. I felt a lot of pressure to make sure we could have that conversation as an organization, as a team, and we could move it somewhere really positive. And so I know I'm a bit of a fangirl of Please. You guys have maybe noticed that throughout the day. But I'm really excited that that's where it's moving, because I have so much respect for Michelle and Amber and the work that they do together, the work that that whole team does. And I think it's going to just give an incredible foundation to Respectful Workplace Week next year and moving forward. So I want those who've stuck with us for this conversation to just know that next year we're still going to do this. We're going to do it at the same time. And when you see advertising for it, and you see all of a sudden that it is under the Please New Brunswick branding or the Please New Brunswick name instead of MMFC, that it's the same thing. It's absolutely part of the plan.
And I want you all to email me personally and tell me what you would like to see from future Respectful Workplaces Week.
You think she's joking? She's not. She
No,
really
I'm
does.
not. I'm gonna maybe if Amber's still on, she can drop my direct email address in the chat. Genuinely, again, especially I have a feeling those of you who are still on the call are people who've been with us for a while and care about this event. Like genuinely, like please give us your feedback through the participant survey. If there are format ideas or anything else that you want to make sure we hear as part of this conversation, if you have the address of any of us, email any of us, and it will get back to the core organizing team. Oh, thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, Amber just didn't have access, but she gave it to me and
Perfect.
I put it in. Yeah, absolutely. We really do. I'll even put my own in. We really do care about seeing this be an event that meets the needs of New Brunswickers. So I want to say thank you so much, Michelle, for allowing me to be a little bit late starting this event so we could finish things off with Spencer. And thank you so much for your time this afternoon coming and talking about this. Thank you to everyone who has stayed for this conversation. We have had 65 people sitting through this conversation with us, which is incredibly exciting to me to think that this many people care about the conference as much as I do. I am really excited for the events tomorrow.